PragerU posts Populist Cringe. Let's go over it. We go to type in PragerU. They recently took a sort of turn on their healthcare stance. And I guess let's just explore.
How messed up is our healthcare system? This messed up.
Messed up is our healthcare
Researchers
system.
compared prices amongst 53 hospitals for a standard heart procedure called a CABG, or a coronary artery bypass grafting. Not only did the researchers find a tenfold difference in price for the same procedure across hospitals, from $44,000 to $448,000, but they also found no correlation between higher prices and better quality of care. Other studies have shown there can be up to a 39-fold variation in price for a simple blood test across medical centers in this.
This is how hard they're sort of beelining towards populism. PragerU, I remember when PragerU back in like, I don't know, 2016, 2017, was pumping videos that were demonstrating that there was supposedly no issue whatsoever with American healthcare. That the issue was actually, in fact, on the American people for not seeking out available tax vouchers and supplement programs that offered the assistance that the American people claimed that they needed, but just simply weren't out getting in the case of very expensive healthcare. Now they're posting this cringe showing a complete and total 180 on their stance that, in fact, it is the case that healthcare prices are incredibly fucked. The market is incredibly inelastic. Right, that prices can range so variably because demand stays the same, because we recognize that healthcare is something that people need with or without a price tag, and no matter how much that price tag is going to be, in terms of the overall amount, like no matter how much it costs to get a hip replacement, if you need a hip replacement, you're going to pay that amount because, as it turns out, the alternative, death or serious bodily, like serious long-term chronic pain, is just not one that people want to face or exist under. So they're recognizing that.
Here's the punchline. We have no idea how much we're paying for healthcare services. Why is it that when you need to get a surgery or medical test, you can't get a price the same way you can when you shop for, say, an airline ticket?
This is true. This is very much true. Again, I want to stress, they are taking this, these are the points that they are capitulating to, I don't even want to say the left necessarily, but just the rest of the modern world when it comes to recognizing that healthcare, when it comes to being placed on a market, is an incredibly, how should I say, like, is incredibly antithetical to the service that healthcare provides and the function that markets serve or exist for. And it's that, yeah, it is incredibly difficult to see what the price of a specific healthcare, or rather a specific procedure is when you're, say for instance, especially in dire need of getting said specific procedure.
Imagine if the airlines didn't post prices. Instead, when you bought your ticket, Delta just said, "We'll bill you after your flight, because we don't know what the cost of fuel will be that day." Then a week later, you get a bill for $4,000. You'd scream bloody murder, and rightly so. Yet this is precisely what we are dealing with in American healthcare.
Ironically, I feel like this is a poor example because of how incredibly streamlined the entire procedure of airline travel is. This being said, of course, I'm not necessarily against the idea of nationalizing public transport, including in the case of airlines. As we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, the airline companies went under, as well as other commercial transportation companies, such as like cruise lines, etc. But this is a very poor example because I think the costs of running planes in the air is actually very much something that we can measure and price out and find exact dollar amounts for when it comes to pricing out the individual price per seat of a patron using the airline system. So it's kind of ironic that he appeals to this because, like, no airline company would ever do this ever. No airline company would suddenly be like, the price of airline fuel can be very finicky. And so we are actually just going to bill you after your flight without telling you or giving you even any rough estimate beforehand as to how much the flight would cost. again, that the problem with airlines, not that we're going to focus on that because this video is of course focused on healthcare, but just to demonstrate how stupid this analogy is. The problem with airlines is not that he's saying there is a problem with airlines, but if there is a problem with airlines, it's not that the price of said airlines is difficult to math out, which is what makes this analogy poor. It's that the cost of putting people up in the sky for transportation is often just barely profitable, even in instances where you completely fill the plane. So again, reasons why this analogy is a poor one right there. Or rather, a reason right there as to why this analogy is poor.
When you go in for a back surgery or 1,000 other kinds of medical procedures, you have no idea how much it's going to cost you.
True.
Worse, no one would be able to tell you if you bothered to ask.
Yeah, I would say true, especially like if you're going up to, say, for instance, the desk worker that's like signing you in. Yeah, it'd be very difficult for them to just give you an off the ball, even like rough estimate of what the cost would be for that.
Medical billing is a ridiculously complex dance between hospitals, insurance companies, and various middlemen.
True, and it's often the case that none of these three institutions have your best interest at heart as a consumer. Your best interest at heart. Yours. Fuck. I should have been like yours. Your best interest at heart is often not covered by any of these institutions, right? That oftentimes these are all seeking to maximize their own profits first and your interest second, right? Even though all of three of these are supposed to represent you in some fashion, right? The various other middlemen is kind of a misnomer, right? I think I don't actually know what he's referencing here, but certainly your insurance company and the hospital at which you receive the procedure are going to have your interest as a secondary or an afterthought when concerning the price of the procedure that you receive. And that is something that is important to consider, and that PragerU is, ironically enough, especially given their stance on this issue 3 to 4 years ago, is now backpedaling on. So very interesting to see that.
The hospitals charge crazy prices. $100 for aspirin, for example. And the insurance companies and middlemen agree through special, often secret deals to pay some percentage of that.
This is true. They're called, this, by the way, just a little bit of educational purposes here. If this entire segment isn't going to be educational. That's called a moral hazard, right? When a lack of an incentive to guard against risk where one is protected from its consequence, e.g. by insurance. This is an instance in which the risk conferred by these insurance companies and these hospitals when negotiating out the price of your procedure is not actuated by the insurance company or the hospitals themselves, right? Because the risk in making these negotiations is the price of the procedure, and that directly affects you, the consumer, mostly, right? Them secondarily, assuming you complain about it enough and raise a big stink about it to your Congress floor, then it secondarily affects them because you could risk voting somebody in who might change this system. But that for the most part, if these industries can nickel and dime the fuck out of you, they will, they're coming, right, for your dollar. And you should be scared of that.
How your knee replacement, which the hospital says costs $50,000 on its itemized bill, actually costs you $5,000 after your deductible. Out of all this confusion, one thing is crystal clear. Medical costs are skyrocketing.
True.
And Americans are having more and more trouble paying the bill.
True.
Nearly 1 in 5 of us has medical debt and collections. If you think this problem doesn't apply to you because you have insurance through your employer, and therefore your costs are covered, think again.
Again, true.
Over the past 5 years, employees have had to increase their contribution to their premiums by 15%.
Facts.
In addition to a 36% increase in deductibles.
Man, I feel bad. I'm saying facts and true a lot in a PragerU video, but again, this is why it's Populist Cringe, is because the entire first part of this video is just them appealing to the middle class, trying to argue, rather, I shouldn't say demonstrate, but trying to argue that it is in fact the case that healthcare in the United States is, fucked to some extent, and that something needs to be done, but that their solution is going to be garbage, and we'll get into that in a second.
Meanwhile, wage increases have not kept up, rising 14% over that same period.
Doubly true.
Yes,
Triply
that
true.
salary increase you so richly deserved was eaten up by the increased insurance premium you had to pay.
I would love to see what salary increase he's talking about, because as far as I'm aware, wages have mostly stagnated since the 70s. Very, very, or at least they certainly have not kept up with even, like, say, for instance, inflation, or that they've barely kept up with inflation, something along those lines.
Reflected in the quality of the care you were getting. That is, if you were paying more to get better care, maybe this would make some sense. But as we saw in the coronary bypass example, there is little or no correlation between what you pay and what you get. So how do we
Don't
get out of this
don't think
mess?
I don't think I necessarily agree with this one. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about here. It is definitely the case that like millionaires and billionaires who are able to pay exorbitant amounts of money on their medical procedures receive lower wait times, higher quality of care, and higher tech and safer procedures. That's just been demonstrated across the board in any study I've ever seen. So I don't exactly know what the fuck he's talking about here. I wonder if the reason he's saying this is, again, to like sort of weasel in the right-wing aspect of this populism, just to make the argument that, hey, it doesn't actually matter how much you pay, you're getting the same care no matter what. And that's the issue with the healthcare system, is that they charge wildly different amounts for very similar procedures. It's a very weird angle to tackle this issue and appeal from, but I guess I can kind of see how this would demonstrate to some, like, you know, conservative middle class working family that, like, oh man, I'm getting fucked over. Is a conspiracy or not conspiracy? I'm getting fucked over by the price of healthcare. That's the biggest issue here, which will tailor into the point that he's about to make here in a second.
No correlation between what you pay and what you get. So how do we get out of this mess? A big part of the answer is price transparency.
Exactly.
Something almost every American wants. Even in our era of political polarization, almost 9 out of 10 Americans say they favor price transparency for medical services.
Yeah, and almost like
sense.
60% of Americans say that they favor socialized medicine. So I'm not entirely sure what that statistic that he just mentioned is supposed to appeal to. When, again, I can look at like Americans' opinions on Medicare for all and show that public opinion on single-payer healthcare, national health plans, and expanding access to Medicare coverage is actually significantly more favorable than the idea of just reforming the healthcare with more transparent pricing, and that's it. See if I can't find a percentage here. As Medicare for all becomes a staple of national conversations. Sorry, hold up. Oh wait, here we go. Nice. Kaiser Family Foundation. This is old data as far as I'm aware. This is data from like back in 2018. Old in air quotes, right? Most support federal government doing more to provide health insurance, but Republican support has declined over time. You say they favor the federal government doing more to help provide health insurance for more. Sorry. National Health Plan didn't garner majority support until 2016. And that support for that has risen over time since then. Use of National Medicare for All plan remained relatively unchanged in recent years. Hold up. But what is unchanged? At 53%? Yeah. Did I say 6? I meant to say, I guess I should have said 5. But yeah, still over half of the country, right? Because 53% is over half the country. And plus 42% saying they oppose. So that means that there is a 9% discrepancy here, or sorry, 11% discrepancy of people who are undecided on the issue that could be swayed easily either way. Partisan divided with 3/4 of Republicans opposing Medicare for all, while 8 and 10 Democrats favor it. Terminology, of course, affecting the way that you ask the question of, do you want the government to take over your healthcare and be a big boogeyman, versus do you just want a simple Medicare for all type plan, which would merge private insurance with into the government body, and would I don't even know, maybe that kind of language would still be a little bit too scary because the idea of big government scares a lot of Americans. But that the effects would be the things, the effects of Medicare for all are what Americans seem to champion, or at least what the majority, or at least a very significant plurality percentage of the population seem to be mostly in favor of, regardless even of, I suppose, the way that you asked the question, right? Universal health coverage, 63% positive. Medicare for all, 63% positive. National health plan, 59%. Single payer health insurance system, 49%, with even only 32% negative. I think that's important to decide, or to demonstrate that there's 19 people who say they have no opinion, but are probably more so undecided. And even when you say something like socialized medicine, that there is still a plurality of people that support it over people that are against it, even though that discrepancy is only 2%, but that there are still 11% of people in these polling numbers that are undecided on the issue and could probably be swayed either way. I mean, transparency can be good even with socialized healthcare. For sure, I guess it could be beneficial for the, I mean, and the government would be, I assume, a better body at doing something like that, because then the government would suddenly be a monopsony of the purchaser of healthcare goods, right? That in the instance in which we have the government being the single payer for healthcare, suddenly the government is the only buyer of healthcare from hospitals, and that their ability to negotiate prices would be significantly more in favor of the interests of every man, woman, child, non-binary person out there than, say, for instance, the interests of like some insurance company that definitely has their own profits to line, or coffers to line, I guess you could say. That the point of a non or mostly nonprofit organization that operates for the people and has an administration, of course, that is voted in, would be doing its absolute best to guarantee that the healthcare services provided by the government, or sorry, provided by the private, provided by the healthcare industry would be in the best interest of the people who are requiring its services, rather than their own coffers to line. For sure.
9 out of 10 Americans say they favor price transparency for medical services. Makes sense. Markets only work when consumers have the proper information to make purchasing decisions. And the two most important pieces of information are the price and the quality of a good or service. As it relates to healthcare, Americans don't have access to services. Makes sense. Americans say they favor price transparency. Services. Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Markets only work when consumers have the proper information to make purchasing decisions.
God, as I was attempting to demonstrate earlier, this is the issue with healthcare, is that it's not a market, or it's not something that can operate on a market in a market framework the same way that many other services can. Because healthcare is an inelastic good. It's something that you access. It's a good that you access, if you want to call it a good, or even a commodity. Although, again, this sort of language is dubious when you're talking about something like healthcare, and it's antithetical to my very point to even use this sort of language. But that if we're even going to act as though healthcare is a commodity or a good that you purchase on a market, it just does not work that way, as borne out by the data. That people access healthcare at the exact same rate when the price of said procedure is 10 times above what they could be purchasing in a different area of the country, for reasons that extend far beyond just the single law of price, or whatever the fuck it's called. Single law of price, I think it's called. Or the law of one price, I should say, right? Is the concept that in economics that states that the price of an identical asset or commodity will have the same price globally, regardless of location, when certain factors are considered, right? That is an impossible law to apply to healthcare due to a myriad of factors that are involved with the healthcare industry, such as the procedure that somebody's receiving might only be available by a certain specialist out of state or even out of country, such as the procedure that somebody's receiving might have a different effect on their body than it does another person, and that it might require special circumstances surrounding the procedure that are unique to that specific individual that may drive the price up or down. But again, if you need that procedure, you won't care how much the price costs, just so long as you can guarantee that your livelihood is, saved. So just things like, I mean, it can be even be smaller things. Excuse me. The price of healthcare is also one of those things that, like, when you're accessing healthcare, oftentimes it is not because you are able to sit there and shop on a market for a very long period of time. It's because you need it right then and there. And so the price is an afterthought to your health, your immediate health, in the instance of you accessing it. This extends into the conversation of, like, what happens when I'm in a coma, right? How do I negotiate the price then? Or what happens if I'm left unable to talk or think clearly, like a concussed state, right? Like, are you just going to wait to perform any procedure on me for fear of me wanting to negotiate, or not for fear, but for legal reasons of, like, I don't want to, provide a procedure to him that could help him out of this coma, because I don't know if he's going to accept the price of the procedure that we're going to need to enact. Like, these all make up, and there's of course a litany of other reasons as to why healthcare just doesn't operate on a market in the same way that most other goods and services do and can.
And the two most important pieces of information are the price and the quality of a good or service.
Not true.
As it
Yet again,
relates
I
to
want to
health-
stress price and quality are not the only two, or not even the most important. I shouldn't even say are not even the most important. That price and quality can certainly be important issues, especially when when discussing a good such as healthcare. But that they cannot be considered the only two most important conversational points at hand. I would even argue that they're not even necessarily the most important. Not even necessarily. Let me be a little bit more conspicuous in my language here, okay? They're not the most important things that people consider when discussing a given healthcare procedure. All right, people care far more than the price. People care far more than they do. Sorry. People care quite a lot more about whether or not the procedure will work, what the long-term ramifications of said procedure will be, what the short-term ramifications of the procedure will be, what kind of pain or injury they will undo, so to speak, going under said procedure, what sort of stipulations said procedure presents them compared to another buyer of the same procedure, right? People care far more about these sorts of ramifications than they do the price of the procedure itself. That the price is very, very often, study after study has shown that this to be the case, that the price is far in a way an afterthought to very to many procedures that we receive here in the United States. Sure, if you're getting something like plastic surgery, that's something that you can maybe negotiate a little bit more out in terms of the price of said procedure, or like a tattoo or something, although I don't know if that's considered a healthcare procedure. It's probably not, more of a body modification, but either way, right, if you're getting something that's completely elective, that's one thing, right? But that the vast majority of people who access our healthcare services are not receiving just elective care, right? Or care that is like not in any way not necessary. That the vast majority of people who enter our healthcare industry are people who need the care that they're accessing or attempting to access, and that price is always going to be an afterthought to things like quality. I will give them that, and also other things such as external ramifications of the procedure. What's up, Frames? And Blue.
Care. Americans don't have access to either of those. Granted, there are medical situations.
Wouldn't all that be considered a part of quality, though? You could argue. I think when he's saying quality, he's trying to differentiate between the the tertiary, the seemingly tertiary aspects of healthcare that I was talking about, such as, again, like the external ramifications of the procedure that's being done to you, such as like the kind of pills that you're going to need to take afterwards, or the sorts of medicine, I should say, that you're going to need to take afterwards, versus just the overall quality of the care of the procedure, which will mean like how effective the procedure is, which, I mean, in some ways, I guess you could say does merge one of the points that I made earlier, which is like how effective the procedure will be on you versus another patron of the same procedure. But that I don't think he's, I don't know, he's being very weaselly with his language here, so it's difficult to parse out exactly what he means when he says the very, very general and open term of, you know, of quality. It's like, what does quality mean in this context? But I'm going to assume that when he says quality, again, he's not talking about the ramifications of getting a certain procedure in terms of like the kinds of things that you will need to do to maintain your health afterwards, right? Or the effects that it has on your body specifically versus another patron of the same procedure. I think what he's talking about is like things like the equipment that will be used on said procedure and how high tech it is, or how reliable the procedure is in a vacuum of like people that have exactly this particular ailment and nothing else, and like how effective it was on treating specifically their illness. Never mind any sort of pre-existing conditions,
which don't lend themselves to comparison shopping. If you're in a car accident and have to be rushed to the emergency room, you're not worried about the cost. But 60% of healthcare is shoppable.
I don't know what that stat's coming from.
Surgery, medical test, or diagnostic
exam. Okay. Elective surgery, again, we already went over this. If you're talking about plastic surgery, maybe I could budge a little bit on that. In terms of medical test and diagnostic exams, I've never bought this argument. I shouldn't say never, because I shouldn't even act like this is an argument that's regularly parroted. Medical tests and diagnostic exams are not things that we see when we track, because we do statistics on this, right? When we do track whether or not consumers often shop between doctors' offices when they're going for like their yearly checkup or diagnostic exam. We do not see people play this sort of game of like, well, which one is most cheap, or rather, which one is the least expensive. What we far often is it the case that instead people prefer to go to the same doctor's office regardless of the price, because they prefer the familiarity, in the sense of this. I don't. Let me just say because people prefer the familiarity of going to their family doctor, again, regardless of the price that doctor or the office that he's working at is going to charge for some sort of medical test or a diagnostic exam.
Diagnostic exam that shouldn't have much cost variation amongst providers.
Also not
These
true.
services present a great opportunity to allow the laws of market competition to operate. One study estimates that $760 billion is wasted in the US healthcare system every year, with administrative complexities as one of the main culprits.
Yes, I wonder why administrative complexities is often deemed one of the most wasteful elements of our healthcare system. Could it be because we have this random private for-profit third-party element to it that is much less interested in bargaining for your best interest at heart, and much more interested in lining its coffers as much as possible in the form of private insurance? Is what I'm talking about, if you can't tell, right? Is that perhaps the reason why administrative complexities are the main culprit, or one of the main culprits as to why healthcare costs so much in the United States? Could that be the reason?
If a transparent upfront price was offered, and most medical care could be paid for in advance just like an airline ticket, medical centers could cut a significant portion of their administrative staff that's involved in billing and debt collection. Furthermore, if pricing was transparent, Americans could actually start pushing the market towards rewarding those who offer a fair and honest price and pushing out the bad actors. That, in turn,
the bad actors, as I already demonstrated, the bad actors are the insurance companies. Wait, what are we saying here? I don't even, what kind of garbage is this?
Would allow more Americans to have access to healthcare. We don't need the government to take over our healthcare. Just the opposite. We need the government to get out of the way. Let entrepreneurs innovate in the healthcare space.
This is so Weasley.
Prices go down and quality goes up.
This makes no sense. This makes, given the points that he's been presenting prior in this video, like what he's saying does not follow. What he's been saying does not logically extend into this point that he's making right now. Nowhere ever in this video did he mention anything about the size of the government in terms of impacting the price of healthcare. And if anything, right, if we're even going to buy this narrative that price transparency is king and that's all we need to have happen to make the healthcare industry more affordable for fellow Americans, well then let's look at the Trump administration, right, which was trying to pass law after law after law to make prices more transparent, and recognize that is government intervention in the market of healthcare, right? That it makes no sense to say we need the opposite. We need the government to get out of the way when the main champion of price transparency, a policy that yet again does not work as a means of driving down the cost of healthcare for average consumers. That even that guy was using government intervention to push price transparency, because again, insurance companies and hospitals would prefer the price to remain transparent, because when the price remains transparent, again, it's not necessarily just the case that is the only thing that makes healthcare costs more. Healthcare costs are just wildly expensive because that is because these procedures costs quite a lot of money, and that maybe it is the case that we, instead of paying for these things in a market, should probably have something like I don't know, maybe just have these issues subsidized via the government, in a program that we would pay for a little bit more in our income taxes, to make sure that our income taxes, and have that situated in such a way that it would of course be progressive. Right, I'm getting off on my own little tangent here, but either way, again, it is not the case that price transparency is going to fix the issues that hail the healthcare industry. Fuck it, even if it is the case that like the procedure that you need has it written right next to it like a fucking menu that you're ordering at a restaurant, $4,000 for a hip replacement doesn't change the fact that you're still bankrupt if you can't afford that, right? And that you're gonna have to file a Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 if you don't have that kind of money, right? I don't see how price transparency solves that issue specifically, which is by far and away the biggest issue, especially of this year, given the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's already happened in fields like laser eye surgery, MRI testing, and plastic surgery. Giving consumers better information always leads to better decisions, and healthcare is no exception. Price transparency not only lowers costs, but it puts the patient back in the center of what medicine is all about, helping those in a
Oh, yeah.
time of need. Price transparent.
This is just random weasel words. Like, again, nothing that he's saying has followed none of these conclusions that he's made has followed or have followed from the points that he's provided previously. And that's why I call this populist, right-wing populist cringe, because it is in fact the case, right? Some of these points are true. It is in fact the case that insurance companies, hospitals, and I guess random middlemen, again, I don't know who that is. I don't know who we're dog whistling there, but it is the case that these companies, or rather these industries, often charge consumers ludicrous prices for goods that they could receive over the counter at a pharmaceutical, or like at a CVS or like a Walgreens or whatever, for a fraction of the cost. That is the case that hospitals have this sort, hospitals and insurance companies have these sort of really, really weird aspects to them. And I think a lot of the points that he's making right here is going to resonate even with people on the right, because these are points that the left has been making for a very long period of time. And the only reason they don't stick to the right is not because they're not factually true, because even as they're admitting right here, they are factually true. They're capitulating on these points. The reason why they finally stick is not because, again, they weren't factually true to begin with, but it's just because they're marketed in such a way that the solutions are still not the correct solution, which is of course socialized medicine, which every other major developed country that we see has in some form or another, right? At least in the form of a universal program that merges private and public insurance significantly far and beyond the way that we do it here in the United States. And that's why, again, this is called right-wing cringe, populist cringe, because of course, again, I want to stress, this will appeal far more to the average conservative sitting at home, watching this on their TV, because I don't know. I don't know how you'd manage to load a PragerU video on your TV if you're not using your laptop to do it or some shit like that. But boomers are probably still watching shit on TV these days. But yeah, that is what this video appeals to, is that person, the person that's sitting out in the suburbs somewhere thinking to themselves, man, my damn healthcare costs do cost too much, and fuck, man, I really love the Republican Party and hate them gays, but fuck, man, I wish they'd get around on healthcare because god damn it, man, my last hip replacement put me out of a job or some shit. That's, again, like, I can see the conclusions to this video still showing that the right just hasn't come around. They'll probably never come around to the actual solution that the rest of the modern world has recognized is the main problem or culprit of the healthcare industry, and that is the healthcare industry itself. That is the fact that we are, again, paying for healthcare like it is a marketed good, or like it is able to be a marketed good, and it's just not. Healthcare is it's a human right, man. You need it. We all need it.